a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas is an American actor, producer, director, and author. He is one of the last surviving stars of the film industry's golden age. After an impoverished childhood with immigrant parents and 6 sisters, he had his film debut in The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, with Barbara Stanwyck. Douglas soon developed into a leading box office star throughout the 1950s and 1960s, known for serious dramas, including westerns and war movies. During his career, he appeared in more than 90 movies. Douglas is known for his explosive acting style. Douglas became an international star through positive reception for his leading role as an unscrupulous boxing hero in Champion, which brought him his first nomination for the Academy Award for Best Actor. Other early films include Young Man with a Horn, playing opposite Lauren Bacall and Doris Day, Ace in the Hole opposite Jan Sterling, and Detective Story. He received a second Oscar nomination for his dramatic role in The Bad and the Beautiful, opposite Lana Turner, and his third nomination for portraying Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life. In 1955, he established Brinner Productions, which began producing films as varied as Paths of Glory and Spartacus. In those 2 films, he starred and collaborated with the then relatively unknown director, Stanley Kubrick. Douglas helped break the Hollywood blacklist by having Dalton Trumbo write Spartacus with an official on-screen credit, although Trumbo's family claims he overstated his role. He produced and starred in Lonely Are the Brave, considered a cult classic, and 7 Days in May, opposite Burt Lancaster, with whom he made 7 films. In 1963, he starred in the Broadway play One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a story he purchased, and which he later gave to his son Michael Douglas, who turned it into an Oscar-winning film. As an actor and philanthropist, Douglas has received 3 Academy Award nominations, an Oscar for Lifetime Achievement, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. As an author, he has written 10 novels and memoirs. Currently, he is number 17 on the American Film Institute's list of the greatest male screen legends of classic Hollywood cinema, and the highest-ranked living person on the list. After barely surviving a helicopter crash in 1991 and then suffering a stroke in 1996, he has focused on renewing his spiritual and religious life. He lives with his second wife, Ann Bidens, a producer. He turned 100 on December 9, 2016. Early life and education. Douglas was born Isha Danielovich in Amsterdam, New York, the son of Brinner, Bertha, and Herschel, Harry, Danielovich. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Cherkasy, Mogilov region, in the Russian Empire, and the family spoke Yiddish at home. His father's brother, who emigrated earlier, used the surname Dembski, which Douglas' family adopted in the United States. Douglas grew up as Izzy Dembski, and legally changed his name to Kirk Douglas before entering the United States Navy during World War II. In his 1988 autobiography, The Ragman's Son, Douglas notes the hardships that he, along with 6 sisters and his parents, endured during their early years in Amsterdam, New York. Growing up, Douglas sold snacks to mill workers to earn enough to buy milk and bread to help his family. Later, he delivered newspapers, and during his youth worked at more than 40 different jobs before getting a job acting. He found living in a family with 6 sisters to be stifling. I was dying to get out. In a sense, it lit a fire under me. In high school, after acting in plays, he then knew he wanted to become a professional actor. Unable to afford the tuition, Douglas talked his way into the dean's office at St. Lawrence University, and showed him a list of his high school honors. He received a loan which he paid back by working part-time as a gardener and a janitor. He was a standout on the wrestling team and wrestled one summer in a carnival to make money. Douglas' acting talents were noticed at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, which gave him a special scholarship. One of his classmates was Betty Joan Pusky, who would play an important role in launching his film career. Bacall wrote that she had a wild crush on Kirk, and they dated casually. Another classmate, and a friend of Bacall's, was aspiring actress Diana Dill, who would later become Douglas' first wife. During their time together, Bacall learned Douglas had no money, and that he once spent the night in jail since he had no place to sleep. She once gave him her uncle's old coat to keep warm. I thought he must be frozen in the winter. He was thrilled and grateful. Sometimes, just to see him, she would drag a friend or her mother to the restaurant where he worked as a busboy and waiter. He told her his dream was to someday bring his family to New York to see him on stage. During that period she fantasized about someday sharing her personal and stage lives with Douglas, but would later be disappointed. Kirk did not really pursue me. He was friendly and sweet, enjoyed my company, but I was clearly too young for him, the 8 years younger Bacall later wrote. Early career. Douglas first wanted to be an actor after he reciting the poem The Red Robin of Spring while in kindergarten and received applause. He enlisted in the United States Navy in 1941, shortly after the United States entered World War II, where he served as a communications officer in anti-submarine warfare aboard USS PC-1137. He was medically discharged for war injuries in 1944 sustained from the accidental dropping of a depth charge. He married Diana Dill on November 2, 1943. They had 2 sons, Michael in 1944 and Joel in 1947, before they divorced in 1951. After the war, Douglas returned to New York City and found work in radio, theater, and commercials. In his radio work, he acted in a number of network soap operas, and sees those experiences as being especially valuable, as skill in using one's voice is important for aspiring actors, and regrets that the same avenues are no longer open to them. His stage break occurred when he took over the role played by Richard Widmark in Kiss and Tell, which then led to other offers. Douglas had planned to remain a stage actor, until his friend, Lauren Bacall, helped him get his first film role by recommending him to director Hal Wallace, who was looking for a new male talent. Wallace's film, The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, with Barbara Stanwyck, became Douglas' debut screen appearance. He played a young, insecure man, stung with jealousy, whose life was dominated by a ruthless older woman, and he hid his feelings with alcohol. It would be the last time that Douglas portrayed a weakling in a film role. Reviewers of the film noted that Douglas already projected qualities of a natural film actor, with the similarity of this role with later ones explained by biographer Tony Thomas. 1940s. Douglas' image as a tough guy was established in his 8th film, Champion, after producer Stanley Kramer chose him to play a selfish boxer. In accepting the role, he took a gamble, however, since he had to turn down an offer to star in a big-budget MGM film, The Great Sinner, which would have earned him 3 times the income. Film historian Ray Didinger says, he saw Champion as a greater risk, but also a greater opportunity. Douglas took the part and absolutely nailed it. Frederick Romano, another sports film historian, described Douglas' acting as alarmingly authentic. Douglas received his first Academy Award nomination, and the film earned 6 nominations in all. Variety magazine called it a stark, realistic study of the boxing rackets. From that film on, he decided that to succeed as a star, he needed to ramp up his intensity, overcome his natural shyness, and choose stronger roles. He later stated, "I don't think I'd be much of an actor without vanity. And I'm not interested in being a modest actor." Early in his Hollywood career, he demonstrated his independent streak and broke his studio contracts to gain total control over his projects, forming his own movie company, Brinner Productions, named after his mother. In 1947 Douglas made Out of the Past. He starred in this film with Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer. Douglas made his Broadway debut in 1949 in Three Sisters, produced by Katharine Cornell. 1950s. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Douglas was a major box office star, playing opposite some of the leading actresses of that era. He played a frontier peace officer in his first Western Along the Great Divide. He quickly became very comfortable with riding horses and playing gunslingers, and appeared in many westerns. He considers Lonely Are the Brave, in which he plays a cowboy trying to live by his own code, as his personal favorite. The film, written by Dalton Trumbo, was respected by critics, but did not do well at the box office due to poor marketing and distribution. In 1950, Douglas played Rick Martin in Young Man with a Horn, based on a novel of the same name by Dorothy Baker inspired by the life of Bick Spiderbeck, the jazz cornetist. Doris Day starred as Jo, a young woman who was infatuated with the struggling jazz musician. This was strikingly opposite of the real-life account in Doris Day's autobiography, which described Douglas as civil, but self-centered, and the film as utterly joyless. During filming, bit actress Jean Spangler disappeared and her case remains unsolved. On October 9, 1949, Spangler's purse was found near the Ferndale entrance to Griffith Park in Los Angeles. There was an unfinished note in the purse addressed to A. Kirk, which read, "Can't wait any longer, going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is away." Douglas, married at the time, called the police and told them he was not the Kirk mentioned in the note. When interviewed via telephone by the head of the investigating team, Douglas stated that he had talked and kidded with her a bit on set, but that he had never been out with her. Spangler's girlfriends told police that she was 3 months pregnant when she disappeared and that she had talked about having an abortion, which was illegal at that time. In 1951, Douglas starred as a newspaper reporter anxiously looking for a big story in Ace in the Hole, director Billy Wilder's first effort as both writer and producer. The subject and story was controversial at the time, and U.S. audiences stayed away. Some reviews saw it as ruthless and cynical, a distorted study of corruption, mob psychology and the free press. Possibly it hit too close to home, says Douglas. It won a Best Foreign Film award at the Venice Film Festival. The film's stature has increased in recent years, with some surveys placing it in their top 500 films list. Woody Allen considers it one of his favorite films. As the film's star and protagonist, Douglas is credited for the intensity of his acting. Roger Ebert described Douglas' focus and energy as almost scary. There is nothing dated about his performance. It's as right now as a sharpened knife. Biographer Gene Phillips notes that Wilder's story was galvanized by Douglas' astounding performance, and no doubt was a factor when George Stevens, who presented Douglas with the AFR Life Achievement Award in 1991, said of him, "No other leading actor was ever more ready to tap the dark, desperate side of the soul and thus to reveal the complexity of human nature." Also in 1951, Douglas starred in Detective Story, nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including one for Lee Grant in her debut film. Grant said Douglas was dazzling, both personally and in the part. He was a big star. Gorgeous. Intense. Amazing. To prepare for the role, he spent days with the New York Police Department and sat in on interrogations. Reviewers recognized Douglas' acting qualities, with Bosley Crowther describing Douglas as forceful and aggressive as the detective. In The Bad and the Beautiful, another of his 3 Oscar-nominated roles, Douglas plays a hard-nosed film producer who manipulates and uses his actors, writers, and directors. Bacall and Doris Day played 2 very different types of women in his life. In Young Man with a Horn, he played a driven jazz musician, based on real-life horn player Bix Beiderbecke. Composer-pianist Hoagy Carmichael, playing the sidekick role, added realism to the film, and gave Douglas insight into the role, being a friend of the real Beiderbecke. In 1954 Douglas starred in Ulysses from Homer's epic poem Odyssey, with Silvana Mangano as Penelope and Circe, and Anthony Quinn playing Antinous. The film director Mario Camerini co-wrote the screenplay with writer Franco Brusotti. In 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Douglas showed that in addition to serious, driven characters, he was adept at roles requiring a lighter, comic touch. In this adaptation of the Jules Verne novel, he played a happy-go-lucky sailor who was the opposite in every way to the brooding Captain Nemo. The film was one of Walt Disney's most successful live-action movies and a major box office hit. He managed a similar comic turn in The Western Man Without a Star and in For Love or Money. In one of his earliest television appearances, Douglas was a musical guest on the Jack Benny program. In 1955, Douglas formed his own movie company, Brinner Productions, named after his mother. To do so, he had to break contracts with Hal Wallis and Warner Brothers, but began producing and starring in his own films, including Paths of Glory, The Vikings, Spartacus, Lonely Are the Brave and 7 Days in May. While Paths of Glory did not do well at the box office, it has since become one of the great anti-war films, and one of early films by director Stanley Kubrick. Douglas, a fluent French speaker, plays a sympathetic French officer during World War I who tries to save 3 soldiers from the firing squad. Biographer Vincent Lo Bruto describes Douglas seething, but controlled portrayal exploding with the passion of his convictions at the injustice leveled at his men. The film was banned in France until 1976. Before production of the film began, however, Douglas and Kubrick had to work out some major issues, one of which was Kubrick's rewriting the screenplay without informing Douglas first. It led to their first major argument. "I called Stanley to my room. I hit the ceiling. I called him every four-letter word I could think of. I got the money, based on that original script. Not this shit. I threw the script across the room. We are going back to the original script, or we're not making the picture." Stanley never blinked an eye. "We shot the original script. I think the movie is a classic. One of the most important pictures, possibly the most important picture, Stanley Kubrick has ever made." Douglas played military men in numerous films, with varying nuance, including Top Secret Affair, Town Without Pity, The Hook, 7 Days in May, Heroes of Telemark, In Harm's Way, Cast a Giant Shadow, Is Paris Burning, The Final Countdown and Saturn III. His distinctive acting style and delivery made him a favorite with television impersonators such as Frank Gorshin, Rich Little, and David Fry. His role as Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life, directed by Vincente Minnelli and based on Irving Stone's bestseller, was filmed mostly on location in France. Douglas was noted not only for the veracity of Van Gogh's appearance, but for how he conveyed the painter's internal turmoil. Some reviewers consider it the most famous example of the tortured artist who seeks solace from life's pain through his work. Others see it as a portrayal not only of the painter as hero, but a unique presentation of the action painter, with Douglas expressing the physicality and emotion of painting, as he uses the canvas to capture a moment in time. Douglas was nominated for an Academy Award for the role, with his co-star Anthony Quinn winning the Best Supporting Actor Oscar as Paul Gauguin, Van Gogh's friend. Douglas won a Golden Globe Award. Although Minnelli said Douglas should have won an Oscar, he achieved a moving and memorable portrait of the artist, a man of massive creative power, triggered by severe emotional stress, the fear and horror of madness. Douglas himself called his acting role as Van Gogh a painful experience. "Not only did I look like Van Gogh, I was the same age he was when he committed suicide." His wife said he often remained in character in his personal life, when he was doing Lust for Life. "He came home in that red beard of Van Gogh's, wearing those big boots, stomping around the house. It was frightening." In general, however, Douglas' acting style fit well with Minnelli's preference for melodrama and neurotic artist roles, writes film historian James Nairmore. He adds that Minnelli had his richest, most impressive collaborations with Douglas, and for Minnelli, no other actor portrayed his level of cool, a robust, athletic, sometimes explosive player. Douglas loved stagey rhetoric, and he did everything passionately. That level of passion in Douglas' persona was also used effectively by Minnelli in The Bad and the Beautiful, 4 years earlier, in which Douglas was nominated for Best Actor, with the film winning 5 Oscars. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?